So back to the goddesses. We're now down to the ignorance and Savitri's discovery of her soul and the inner countries to which she travels. And as she travels the inner countries, deep inside, she reaches the zone of the soul. It's a zone for her. It's an entire zone, and there in the zone she encounters the three goddesses of the cosmic ignorance. And what Savitri is encountering in her travel inwards are cosmic powers, because she's a Shakti avatar. It's not just individual powers, but cosmic powers that she's encountering. So these are the three cosmic Shaktis, the three soul forces that Savitri encounters in her journey towards the discovery of her soul. The first of these is the Madonna of Sorrows, who represents the power of divine love in matter, the first of the cosmic principles of ignorance. Though herself immortal, her ministry is subject to the iron law of matter, the law of death, and hence her primary expression is one of tragic pity. She's love, but love under the constraints of the law of death, which is the primary ignorance of matter. Next comes the Madonna of Strength, who represents divine love active in the life world, the world of will. Finally, there is the Madonna of Light, the mother of knowledge, acting within the third cosmic principle of ignorance, the mind. Each of these represents what Indian psychology calls a guna of Prakriti, a qualitative principle related to the three principles of the ignorance. Related to matter is tamas, the inertial quality. Related to life is rajas, the kinetic quality. And related to mind is sattva, the radiant quality. Each of these gunas has a divine power or shakti connected with it. These are the triple soul forces: the Madonna of Sorrows, the Madonna of Power, and the Madonna of Light or Knowledge. The Madonna of Sorrows is that aspect of the Divine Mother who ministers to the persistent action of falsehood and death on all living things, causing them pain. She cannot eradicate this universal pain, but can bestow her unconditional love and compassion to the suffering creatures of this world of ignorance. Perhaps the most developed cultural representation of this Shakti is the Virgin Mary as Pieta in Christianity. So this is the image in which Sri Aurobindo presents her to us in this canto. The Madonna who takes the suffering Christ, who represents the soul of man, on her lap and cannot save but comforts unconditionally. Through the solace of her compassion, living beings find strength. She is like an ever-present and long-suffering hand. These are all adjectives that Sri Aurobindo uses, the long-suffering and solace, upholding them in their journeys through ignorance and falsehood. So it is like something from behind that gives us strength just by its pity and compassion. Then there is the power of will, the indomitable and impetuous force of the divine warrior. The closest cultural representation of this goddess is Kali or Durga, the ferocious and tempestuous force of nature. In human cultural history, a predominant male domination has found it more conducive to imagine its feminine deities as mother goddesses of solace and comfort, or domesticated companions of skill and creativity. But Kali represents a rarer arc memory of Amazonian queens and princesses who were victorious in battle and wrestled with impossible odds. Savitri herself is an example of this archetype. So it's interesting that, particularly in South India, we find many examples of this archetype. In many of the temples, if you look at temples, usually have legends connected with them. They're called Sthala Puranas, that they're Puranas that are specific to that temple. So if you look at some of the goddess temples in the south, the way in which they are framed is very interesting. For example, the goddess of, the Meenakshi, goddess of Madurai. The story of the goddess is very similar to the story of Savitri, in that she's actually a princess. She's a princess who's indomitable, who's really very powerful, and nobody can even come close to her. She's so powerful. Just like with Savitri, in the traditional story, she doesn't find a husband because nobody's really, everybody's scared to come close to her. It's the same case with Meenakshi. And finally, she goes in search of her husband, just like Savitri does. And she also is a warrior queen. She battles. And finally, she finds Shiva as her husband. So it's in a similar sense that you find these either Shakti avatars or Shakti vibhutis in the south who become the patron goddesses of temples. The Tantric tradition of India keeps alive this powerful feminine potential, which is why the goddess is identified in terms of power, Shakti. The Madonna of force is constantly at war against the powers of falsehood and denial, but she can never be completely victorious over them. She awaits the arrival of an absolute strength that can change the foundational rules of the evolution and exterminate the powers that she needs to combat ceaselessly and interminably. So that their work is to continue doing this because they have to continue to hold out for the higher principles. The Madonna of light is similarly the goddess whose knowledge constantly streams into the ignorance with its intuitions and its experiences of unity. But these are also ceaselessly distorted by the fragmenting power of mind that clouds them with doubt and therefore makes them fail in their power to relieve or transform the ignorance. In cultural history, it is perhaps the Greeks who have given the greatest importance to this goddess, seeing her as Sophia and to some degree as Athena, the patron goddess of Periclean Athens. Each of these is in a dialectical relationship with its opposite. And as Savitri travels through the psychic world, each one of these voices to her its own claim to be her soul. This is what we were saying about the fact that the psychic life encounters experiences that represents great heights within the ignorance. And if we stop there, in a way we fulfill something, but also that there are potencies greater that have not yet manifest and that may actually call us in our destiny. But immediately following each voice comes the distorted echo of the shadow, the response of the ignorance and falsehood to the divine action. Marked by separation and limitation, this voice is one of suffering and of hubris, distorting the higher message. So here also, I believe it's as if this accompanying voice to the goddess is not something everybody hears. We can only hear maybe the voice of the goddess, but it's because Savitri cannot stop here that she's privy to this voice. She hears the dark shadow, the underbelly of the goddess. We see the man of sorrows, the Rakshasa of might, and the Asura of the distorted mind. These are the three shadows, who constantly dog the steps of their divine counterparts and are the perversions of the powers of the Divine Mother in the universe. Savitri realizes the incompleteness and vulnerability of each of these soul forces and tells them that she is seeking for a more original power of the Shakti in her psychic journey, the integral Godhead. This is the supramental Shakti that is not subject to the fragmentation of being in the avidya, to which the relative Shaktis are subject. Each one of these goddesses subject to avidya appears as a relative power with limited potency, lacking the qualities possessed by the other Shaktis. The Madonna of Sorrows, so as I said, there are two problems here. One is the problem of specialization. Each one is specialized and doesn't have the other powers. And secondly, each one is coupled with its negative, with its shadow, and doesn't have the power to transform. The Madonna of Sorrows has no strength and little of the all-encompassing wisdom of the supreme knowledge. The Madonna of Strength lacks the power of compassion, nor does she demonstrate wisdom. The Madonna of Light has wisdom, but she does not act here with the invincible force or the power of solace which upholds all suffering creatures with its compassion. This fragmentation of the Divine Mother is an aspect of the relativity of this relative world. Also, as a result of this fragmentation and relativity, each of the Shaktis acts independently and often in opposition to each other. Nor can they conquer the relative powers of non-being, falsehood, and ignorance, because these powers are given an equal right of existence within the relative world. Thus, Savitri must find something exceeding these formulations of Shakti, something uniting them in an integral Shakti. She intuits such a possibility and cannot rest with a limited realization, since she is an avatar of such a supramental Shakti. That is, she already feels, senses that there's something else, something greater than these, towards which she is missioned. Therefore, this power is her secret soul. In finding that integral power, she will also find the way to overcome the limitations of the triple soul forces, since these are aspects of her own being subject to the ignorance. She would be able to transform their struggling and suffering selves to their supramental counterparts of integral truth, power, knowledge, immortality, consciousness, and bliss. This is Savitri's mission here. And one of the great teachings of the triple soul forces is that though God is present in this world, and we have known him or her in many forms in many religions, worshipped him and her as the many gods and goddesses on many altars, none of these have had the transforming power. This is partly what Ashwapati is saying, that for centuries we have worshipped you, but where has any change happened? Everything is still the same. Nothing has changed. It is indeed for this reason that atheists are justified in believing that God cannot exist, since if he did, he's either impotent or malicious. Countering such an argument, we may say that God exists and is benevolent, but human beings have been created with the gift of suffering and death. This is often told that suffering and death is a kind of a gift, It's like the maturing power of what it means to live. The human condition is a special experience of the divine. But this could only be tenable if the human being, like the animal, was incapable of intuiting a divine life. If that's all that we can experience, then yes, it's a gift. But if we can intuit, if we are burdened with the intuition of something greater, if, Sri Aurobindo, the Life Divine says, where he exalts the human for discontent. Man is the greatest because he's the most discontent. To dream of a divine life and be denied it forever is a sign of incapacity or perversity in the Creator. Instead, Sri Aurobindo affirms this human intuition of divine perfection as a promise, and Savitri's acknowledgement of the existence of an integral Shakti beyond the incapacities of the triple soul powers as her true soul spells out the trajectory of her uncompromising destiny. She will not compromise with this condition. Seek for something that is beyond. Not be satisfied with a half solution, whether of compassion or strength or even wisdom. The three Shaktis which represent the Divine Mother and the cosmos have not been able to transform it because they have accepted an equal right to its habitation as that given to suffering, death, falsehood, and ignorance. Therefore, they are continuously and unendingly trying to affirm God through the battle of the Devas and Asuras. It is only when a transcendent power can bridge the absolute and the relative that a full transformation of the ignorance will be possible, bringing about a divine life here. This is the aim and goal of Sri Aurobindo's teaching, of his life, his work, as well as of Savitri. Savitri embodies this transcendent Shakti that Sri Aurobindo calls for in terms of a descent. And this is what she represents vis-a-vis the triple soul forces, overcoming their separation and limitations and replacing their action by an invincible divine power. And we actually can do some reading because that's the end of this part. So any comments, questions at this point? Yes, Kika.
I was just thinking if you want to elaborate on that there was an existing, for example, Ramakrishna talked about Ishra Koti and Jiva Koti, where the gulf was still maintained, like about evolutionary being and involutionary being, as if we can never reach. So it kind of had that Platonic duality, where Sri Aurobindo tries to bring in that. So you do that.
Yeah, yes. So what is behind this also, what Sri Aurobindo is trying to point out is that we've always accepted our lot. That in a way, this notion of a duality has been accepted. That there is a realm of the gods, there's a realm of the ideal, there's a realm of the perfect, and there's a realm of the imperfect. And the realm of the imperfect will never be equal to the realm of the perfect. Just like the realm of the origin in Plato will never be equaled by the realm of the copy, which is our life here, which is always a copy of the divine forms or ideas. So in the Indian system, you have Vidya and Avidya, or you have the realm of Aditi, which is the undivided realm, and the realm of Diti, which is the realm of duality or dualisms, the days and nights of our lives. So the solution is you recognize that, and either you do the best in this life to stay as close as possible to the heights, or you enter into some kind of asocial condition, a monastery or something like that, or you try to enter into nirvana or the exclusive non-dual condition. And when you can drop this body, and the aim or goal is to enter into such a deep samadhi that in a few days, weeks, your body will just fall and you're absorbed in the higher realm. So the higher realm is the transcendent realm that's privileged. With Sri Ramakrishna, we start getting a new idea. And this is, we were talking about the idea of Vijnana, this Vijnana which bridges the two, which is a principle that overshoots the dividing principle of mind and really can utilize the dividing power as a creative power by which it experiences multiplicity and the play of multiplicity. So the rationale, in a way, you're talking about necessity, but rationale for a play of multiplicity is not necessarily the power aspect, but a play of multiplicity. As I said earlier, that Sri Aurobindo sees this entire creation as a creation of the Ananda plane, of the plane of bliss. And so the rationale is a new manifestation of bliss, which is the bliss of the relationality of multiplicity. The one being that experiences its bliss through relation. That is the rationale. If we experience, the one thing needs to be understood, which is the one is infinite. It's infinite not only in its infinite manifestations, but it's infinite in its infinite self-experience. See? So in becoming many, the one is actually encountering its own infinity in each of its many. Each individual is an infinite uniqueness of the divine. So it's almost as if each one of us is a horizon of being to each other of us.
Would you say each individual what is a what?
Now you really got me, because 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 it's the infinity of being which faces us in every being. I'm not sure.
Each individual is a unique.
Horizon of being.
Yeah.
Each individual is a unique.
Horizon.
Yeah,
that's not what
it is a unique horizon, because being has a horizon. In other words, a horizon is the extent to which I know myself, my own infinity. See, but radical infinity, each one of us is radically infinite to each other, because the infinity of what I can project as knowledge or of even existence, each individual exists at the limit condition of that, beyond that. And this is only possible because of the radical infinity of God. God cannot be contained. God cannot contain itself. So this is the overflowing radical infinity of the divine, which becomes the play of infinity in the multiplicity. This is the reason why, this delight or bliss, ananda, is looking to manifest itself as the play of multiplicity, as the manifest experience of divinity in its own infinite horizons. And that kind of manifestation is what we are moving towards. The evolution is moving towards. That's why the one becomes the many, so to say. So now we're coming back to this notion of, bridging the two, Vijnana. This is the Vijnana bridges the one being and the multiple self-becomings, the infinite self-becomings. But idea of Vijnana was lost. See, this understanding of Vijnana that Ramakrishna brings back, in a sense, it was lost. We don't have this idea. The word Vijnana, you find this even in Sri Aurobindo's chapter in the Life Divine that we are studying in our Synthesis of Yoga class, called Vijnana or Gnosis, right? Where he's pointing to this fact that the meaning has been lost. That the meaning is either science, that's one of the meanings of Vijnana, common meanings today, or it's some infinite transcendent. So in other words, this bar of Vidya and Avidya, either we assimilate it to the Avidya and say that Vijnana is intellect through which we arrive at science and understanding of the laws of things. So it is brought under the regime of mind, or we push it into Vidya and say Vijnana is exclusive self-knowledge of the divine. See? But to posit it as a plane in itself between the two, which is what the Isha Upanishad is talking about, Ramakrishna begins doing that. See, this is his revisionary understanding of Vijnana. But what he does along with it is he says, yes, this is possible. It is possible for us to experience this bridge between the one and its expression, its self-becomings. But it's not possible for most people to experience, because it is only the elect of God, the Ishwar Koti, those who belong to the abode of God, like avatars, or like the rishis of the Veda, beings of that kind, or of Vivekananda, beings of that kind can experience it, because we come back to the notion of psychic capacity. Their psychic capacity is great enough, and he uses the term of traveling up and down the ladder. He's saying most can climb up the ladder and that's it. They end up there. Some can climb down the ladder and retain a faint memory of what was up there. But only the elect of God can climb up and down the ladder. So this is where he ends. And in Sri Aurobindo's case, he takes it one stage further and he says, this is the destiny of the human. It's for all of us to achieve. And this should be our aspiration. This is the only adequate aspiration for the human. Everything else is inadequate. Yeah, Charles.
It's interesting, as you were saying that, I always wondered when I first read Savitri many years ago, like, why is Maheshwari not one of the goddesses? But then Maheshwari is Isha, Ishvara, it's like Shiva,
Yeah.
right? Maheshwar wouldn't be one of these goddesses in the ignorance. It is already, by definition, in the above the lid.
Yeah.
Right, so it couldn't, that one couldn't come down, so that it becomes this gunic formulation.
Exactly.
So as you were saying it, it was just like, oh, okay, then now it makes sense why he didn't do that. He didn't bring Maheshwar as one of the goddesses. Yeah,
he leaves one of them out because it's these three levels, matter, life, and mind, that belong to the ignorance, while the fourth remains outside the ignorance. Maybe we can look a little bit at the text. Book 7, Canto 4. Sri Aurobindo begins his canto on the triple soul forces with Savitri's encounter with the Madonna of suffering or sorrows.
Book 7, Canto 6.
Canto 4.
Page 505, at least in my book.
529.
This is 503 in this edition.
Yeah. That kind of starts in 502.
Here from alone and prone and listless ground, the passion of the first ascent began. A moon-bright face in a somber cloud of hair, a woman sat in a pale, lustrous robe. A rugged and ragged soil was her bare seat. The landscape in which she is described physically represents the hard and barren conditions of an inhospitable world. Beneath her feet, a sharp and wounding stone. A divine pity on the peaks of the world, a spirit touched by the grief of all that lives. She looked out far and saw from inner mind this questionable world of outward things, of false appearances and plausible shapes, this dubious cosmos stretched in the ignorant void, the pangs of earth, the toil and speed of the stars, and the difficult birth and dolorous end of life. Accepting the universe as her body of woe, the mother of the seven sorrows bore the seven stabs that pierced her bleeding heart. Sri Aurobindo keeps using this numerology of 7. There are also 7 roses of God. But here are the 7 stabs. the 7 sorrows and the 7 stabs. To each of the planes, there is a corresponding action of destruction, a stab. A stab is also related to this divisioning that we are talking about. So the divisions, sometimes you see Sri Aurobindo talks about 4 powers of knowledge, actually. The first power is Vijnana, which is what we were discussing earlier. Vijnana is the comprehensive knowledge of the supermind. But this knowledge of the supermind specializes itself first as a knowledge of objects. In other words, the becoming. The being that becomes through objectifying its powers. Like he says, the seeing of self-truths, whatever it sees in itself, the symbolic appearances, the symbols of God, they are objectified. So it's like seeing in a mirror and they become realities. So this turning of the truths of God into objects, into entities, beings and objects, it's a kind of objectification. In the supermind, in Vijnana, this objectification is, it retains its sense of being the one, the self-becomings of the one. But it's carried out through a process of objectification, and that power of objectification is called pragyana. If pragyana operates in supermind, you have the notion of the many as the self-becomings of the one. But if it occurs in mind or overmind, you have the notion of the cuts between these ones. And it is as if this cutting operation has taken place. This is the stab in a sense. See? This is why sometimes Kali is considered this pragyana power. Because with her sword, she cuts the undivided into discrete entities. These are the necks that she builds her garland with. Each one is a discrete entity. She's cut the connections. This cutting of the connections that builds from multiplicity to the manyness of things also creates division. Sri Aurobindo uses the term differentiated but not divided as the power of the pragyana and supermind, and differentiated and divided as the power of pragyana in ignorance, in mind, in overmind. So this dividing power that actually cuts the links and spills the beans, as it were, spills the multiplicity of God into discrete entities that are then at odds with one another, because each one is a center of the universe. Is like a stab. Each one is like a stab in the body of God.
This reminds me of this Chinnamasta image where the head, the Kali in her cuts her own head, holds that head, and the blood goes into the mouth.
Yeah.
So it's a terrible, but it's very powerful image. So it's like, is it that somehow the mind has been separated and the life force somehow is kind of flowing?
Yeah.
Could you say that?
I think you're right. It is really a dividing of mind and life, and at the same time a system whereby it is still living because it's absorbing its own life power, but at a distance. It can observe its life and at the same time receive its energies.
I wonder, how they could come up with those images? Like,
Yeah.
where did they get it from?
Yeah.
It's amazing.
I think yoga, out of yoga, these images have come. If the material seat of this Madonna is the hard earth, her psychological seat is the inner mind. So that's why he says over here, that she sees from the inner mind. She looked out far and saw from inner mind the questionable world of outward things. So she has the insight of the outer world. Her psychological seat is the inner mind, colored by the sadness of things. From this vantage, she has a perspective on life which sees through passing appearances to the inevitable decline and dissolution of all things. She is also acutely conscious of the interminable injustice and the harsh struggle for consciousness to survive for its brief term on earth. These forms of sadness are the result of the 7 stabs that she bears. These 7 stabs are related to the 7 chakras or centers of experience in human beings. These seats pertain to our material existence, our life of lusts and fears, our vital will, our emotions, our mental life in its 3 forms of speech, sight, and thought. All these become sources of different varieties of suffering. She bears the stabs of these forms of sorrow. The beauty of sadness lingered on her face. So here's where we were talking about the gift of suffering. This is a special kind of sadness, the sadness of the wisdom of knowing the condition of earth. Her face is lined with a special kind of beauty, the beauty of sadness. This is a beauty one sees, for example, in the famous representation of the Pieta by Michelangelo in the Vatican, showing Mother Mary grieving over the martyred Jesus. Her voice carries the music of sadness. An anguished music trailed in her rapt voice. She speaks to Savitri, claiming to be her soul. O Savitri, I am thy secret soul. To share the suffering of the world I came. I draw my children's pangs into my breast. I am the nurse of the dolour beneath the stars. She accepts all the sorrow, misery, and pain of this world, nursing and giving solace to it. I am the soul of all who waiting writhe under the ruthless harrow of the gods. What a powerful image. That the gods, the harrow of the gods, and the souls are writhing underneath the harrow of the gods.
Yeah, Ashish,
Yeah.
mine reads different. It
What is-
says, instead of waiting, it says wailing.
Wailing.
Yes.
Yeah, I think that must be right. Let me take a look here. You're right. Wailing is right. I am the soul of all who wailing writhe under the ruthless harrow of the gods. I am woman, nurse and slave and beaten beast. I tend the hands that gave me cruel blows. She understands intimately our condition because she is the divine element that suffers in all suffering things.
That's what I wanted to ask you. You said, like, she sees with the inner mind, but it seems almost like an unbearable, interminable empathy. You know, I don't know, I don't associate that with mind so much. And
Yeah, I think she sees within her mind in the sense that she can see through, that's one of she's burdened with that knowledge, sort of like Savitri. In a way, she is Savitri who is burdened with that knowledge of Satyavan's death, right? So with the inner mind, she can see that. While her heart, as you're saying, the empathy is that which feels that.
But all of it.
Yeah.
All of the suffering.
All the suffering, the inevitability and the kind of inner meaning of suffering is seen with the inner mind, but she can do nothing about it and helplessly feels it.
Right.
She internalizes it. It's hers. She identifies herself with all the oppressed, marginalized, and dispossessed creatures of this manifestation, woman, slave, and beaten beast. I tend the hands that gave me cruel blows. But her compassion stretches also to those who oppress and hurt, since she experiences too the deep suffering and torture in the heart that turns them into tyrants. It is the primordial condition of separation that is behind this angst, and this aspect of the Divine Mother has accepted to bear the burden of suffering here. The hearts that spurned my love and zeal I serve. I am the courted queen, the pampered doll. I am the giver of the bowl of rice. This is, of course, a reference to Annapurna, who gives the bowl of rice. Of course, there's a whole story connected with this about Shiva, who roams the earth as a beggar, because of a great sin that he has committed in hacking off the head of Brahma, and holds the skull of Brahma in his hand, walking through the earth asking for forgiveness. And it's the Divine Mother that gives rice to that bowl. See? So, in a sense, it is this incompleteness of life, and the kind of sense of, here it's almost like a kind of a story of the original sin in the Hindu Shaiva kind of version of its telling. The original sin is not a human sin, it's a divine sin. The divine commits this sin so as to plunge into the ignorance and then move around crying for salvation.
Why? What was this about cutting off the head of Rama? What happened?
So this is a longish story. The short version is this. It's told in the Shiva Puranas, all the kind of major Shiva Puranas related to Shiva. So this is like a kind of a 2001 Space Odyssey scene, Suddenly this column appears. This column without kind of ceiling or bottom. And Vishnu and Brahma were having a conversation when it appears, it manifests. And they say, what is this thing? And Vishnu says, I was a boar in one of my incarnations, so I can dive deep into the ground and I'll look for the bottom. And Brahma says, my vehicle is the goose, so I'll fly up to the top and we'll reconvene in 1,000 years and share notes about whether we found a top or a bottom. And so Vishnu goes way down and can't find a bottom, and Brahma goes way up, but a petal of a flower is coming down from the top. He sees the petal, He says, well, if there's a petal coming from the top, that means somebody's worshipped this thing and put a flower on top of it. And that's an inference by which I can tell that there is a top to this thing. So he comes down, the two of them meet. Vishnu says, I couldn't find the bottom. And Brahma says, I found the top. So as soon as he says this, the cylinder, the kind of, it's basically, it's a linga. It splits apart and Shiva emerges and strikes at, Brahma had 5 heads, by the way. He strikes at his 5th head, which is the head on top. So he's got 4 heads looking at 4 sides, and the 5th head is hanging on top of them. He strikes at it, and it comes off and sticks to the hand of Shiva. So it's really a kind of a, we may talk about Brahmicide, which is the killing of Brahmins. This is a Brahmacide. It's the killing of Brahma, or the decapitation of Brahma's 5th head.
What about saying I found the top provokes?
Yeah, why did he do
being
that?
beheaded though? I mean, what was?
So
why?
symbolically, this is it. It's all about the top. And, that's the higher head of Brahma, the top of Vishnu, of Shiva. Symbolically, it's this, that there is no top. The transcendent is radically infinite. And Brahma's 5th head represents the connection of the creation with its transcendent source. And the telling of a lie is the way by which the divine cuts the connection with the transcendent. So what you have now is the universal without any transcendent source. But the result of that is that Shiva, with Brahma's head stuck to his hand, descends into the earth and is moving around as a beggar asking for forgiveness. And that's what he's asking from all of us. And if we can mobilize our power of forgiveness, then Shiva will be free, Brahma's head will go back to his head, and we'll attain our connection with the transcendent source. But we don't have the power. It's not so easy. We don't have the power. So he goes around, he goes to Vishnu, he goes to all the places of the earth, he travels around looking for forgiveness. Nobody's got enough power to fill that bowl so that it falls down. Finally, he goes to Benares. And there is the goddess Annapurna over there. Annapurna is a very interesting term because Anna is the term for matter. It is also the term for rice. So, Purna is the term for integral or full. And literally speaking, Annapurna means integral matter. It's like an integral materialism. Okay? And so when he goes to the goddess of integral matter, she puts some rice in his bowl, and the bowl falls off his hand, goes back to Brahma, and Shiva is released. This is a story of the future.
So it's interesting, from my modern Western mind, I think, well, why didn't they just say that? But I guess it's because different ages have different things that they can understand better. So our understanding, the way you described it there is perfectly intelligible. But back in those days, the symbology of Brahman, she would have been more understandable.
It's coded, it's like a coded myth.
I was just thinking about it.
Yeah.
It's like so much coded. And
Code, yeah.
you're decoding for us.
I'm decoding it, yeah. But this is the thing. And why is it so coded? But partly, as you say, people think mythically at that time. But partly they're also keeping it esoteric. Yeah, it's not for public consumption.
Everybody's number.
Yeah.
Got it.
It's to be meditated on. That's the whole thing about contemplative philosophy. That you don't, it means nothing. If I turn it into intelligible understanding and somebody reads it, I really turned it, I trashed it in a way. I don't give you a chance to ponder this deep truth and for it to actually arise in you as knowledge.
But now I understand it well enough to ponder it, and before I didn't, so.
And then note that you've pondered Sri Aurobindo's writings for a long time when this starts making sense. I wouldn't even have been able to say it like I did had I not read Sri Aurobindo, and pondered his teachings.
I mean, this giving rise, could it also have to do with our surrender? Like Annapurna is like giving us to.
Yeah, so that's a beautiful, beautiful way of thinking about it. Because yes, it's the rise she's giving because she's the goddess of integral matter. She's giving the multiplicity, the integral power of multiplicity to Shiva.
Also offering of the Soma in the Veda.
Yeah, yeah,
Soma is like body, that
yeah,
way.
yeah, yeah,
Annam, that.
yeah.
I think, can we meditate for a moment?
Yeah, sure. Let's
Very,
meditate
very
on this for a moment. Yeah. Okay, we can come back. I am the worshipped angel of the house. She is intimately present in the domestic. She is intimately present in the domestic and material activities of human life. She is there easing material circumstances. I am in all that suffers and that cries. Mine is the prayer that climbs in vain from earth. I am traversed by my creature's agonies. I am the spirit in a world of pain. Her status as the divine suffering on earth is made graphically clear in these and the next lines. Sri Aurobindo presents us with the various phenomena that manifest the horrible suffering that is the legacy of an evolving ignorance subject to falsehood. The scream of tortured flesh and tortured hearts, fallen back on heart and flesh, unheard by heaven, has rent with helpless grief and wrath my soul. I have seen the peasant burning in his hut. I have seen the slashed corpse of the slaughtered child, heard woman's cry ravished and stripped and hailed amid the bayings of the hellhound mob. I have looked on, I had no power to save. This is peculiarly prescient in our times when we are faced with these televised images of the horrors that are going on all around, partly sensationalized, no doubt, by the media, but nevertheless true. And exactly as he says, just bombarded as if we have to witness it without being able to do anything about it. I have looked on, I have no power to save. These are the incidents of horrible tragedy on earth, the manifestations of falsehood which humanity and even animality have to bear. The Madonna of suffering experiences these as her own, along with their helplessness. She experiences too the suffering of victim animals, weak to save themselves from those who prey on them. I have shared the fear-filled life of bird and beast, its long hunt for the day's precarious food, its covert slink and crouch and hungry prowl, its pain and terror seized by beak and claw. She has no power to save, but she can give solace through the power of her own endurance, pity, and compassion. I have been pity leaning over pain, and the tender smile that heals the wounded heart, and sympathy making life less hard to bear. Man has felt near my unseen face and hands. I have become the sufferer and his moan. I have lain down with the mangled and the slain. I have lived with the prisoner in his dungeon cell. Heavy on my shoulders weighs the yoke of time. Solace is like an ointment on the hardness of life. This is a long-suffering power within the ignorance, the power of the presence of the sacrificed divine. Within me a blind faith and mercy dwell. I carry the fire that can never be quenched, and the compassion that supports the suns. I am the hope that looks towards my God who never came to me till now. This is a long-suffering power that is hoping that the divine will come to save, but the divine doesn't show up.
It's like quintessential martyrdom.
Yeah. She aspires interminably for the succor of an invisible succor divine, the God who has not appeared to rid the suffering of this world. The condition of suffering on earth has yielded three kinds of theological responses from humans: the denial of the atheist, the escape of the illusionist, and the contention of the hero warrior. The atheist believes that the presence of inhuman suffering is the proof of God's non-existence and tries to ameliorate the human condition by human means. The illusionist believes that suffering is an illusion from which God remains immune and aloof, and that we can escape this condition into the shadowless bliss of God. The hero warrior believes that suffering is given to humans to overcome with God-given strength, and he invokes divine Shakti to battle the conditions of suffering. But the Madonna of sorrow sees deeper than all these three human approaches. She knows that there is something of the divine which is withheld from the cosmos, and aspires through the ages, through the millennia, through every suffering, through every wound on earth, calling out for the intervention of the divine, who has never come till now. His voice I hear that ever says, I come. I know that one day he shall come at last. She is ever in wait. From the very beginning of the earth, she has been waiting patiently. She is the mother of patience incarnate, never losing hope that one day the divine will intervene. Once she identifies herself, she ceases, and a strange warped echo of her voice arises. This is her shadow. Yeah.
So this patience thing, can you say a little bit about this? Because Sri Aurobindo showed that image of tremendous amount of patience that is needed for the supramental manifestation. And here we see that patience, something like never ending. So where is the exact fine border?
So I think you see here, also that's why he points out over here that the Madonna of suffering has some wisdom. This is that inner mind part, has some wisdom that knows that we cannot, neither should we escape, because that's one solution, that okay, let's escape, We can teach that to everybody. I mean, the suffering is not necessary. We can escape from this life. Or we can have this sort of tremendous foolhardy strength that, we can get rid of all suffering. But she sees that suffering is endemic to life. This is the thing about dukkha. This is why the Buddha is saying that the essence of life is suffering. He's talking about this intrinsic ontological suffering that cannot be overcome unless there is a transformative power from outside. He doesn't see that transformative power. But here, the way Sri Aurobindo puts it, the Madonna of Sorrows knows that that is necessary, that it's something in that sense that her patience is also an aspiration. She can't do it, but she can wait and keep calling. I keep asking for the divine to come. And that will take its time. It will come in its own hour. Now, here also there's something related to what you're saying. You see, Ashwapati, by power of will, again we come back to the will to power. By power of will, enters into the zone of the Divine Mother and calls her to come down. It's not through long-suffering patience waiting for her to come.
Yeah.
See?
That's what I was trying to.
Yeah.
Where exactly?
Yeah, there is a fine line because developing patience is really important, but along with it, there must intervene also the will that wants it now. This is Ashwapati saying, we've waited forever, but you have to come down now. And we find this in the record of yoga. There's a place where Sri Aurobindo is saying, in the record of yoga, he's saying, the two aspects of the mother that have predominated in my sadhana till now are Maheshwari and Mahasaraswati. But this must change. It is only by Mahakali's power that it can be now rather than in the indefinite future.
That's in the agenda too, you said?
Yeah, in the agenda.
In
the record.
But you said it was in the agenda too?
No, in the record of yoga.
Oh, just in the record, okay.
Yeah, no, not in the agenda. He's invoking the power of Mahakali into his life, and he says, from henceforth, it is Mahakali and Mahasaraswati who will work together to make it happen now rather than later. So you need that intensity of aspiration and that power of will to call on the divine. This is what we see with Ashwapati, who in a way storms heaven. He says, you must come down now. And she says, well, you can take it. You are greater than the others. Others will be, it's that ancient story about Ganga, the descent of Ganga. She says that if I come down too early, people are not ready for it. And he says, no, you must prepare them, but you have to come down. So I think that's an aspect that the Madonna of Sorrows lacks, you see. She waits patiently because that's all she can do. She's limited to compassion and pity.
I mean, could it be said that it's the human lot to really take that gamble of, taking that leap?
Yeah.
Because if you're too wise and know that it's not possible,
Yeah.
you'll never take that step.
Exactly. Yeah.
Did you say it was Mahakali working with Mahasaraswati?
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
Both of those?
Yeah, those two become, his principal goddesses.
Wow. In the record?
Yeah,
Wow.
yeah. Charles?
So, just saying those two, it's the power and the ability to work until it's done?
Yeah, the meticulous,
Meticulous.
sort of the techne, as they
Right.
say,
The execution,
the inner
perfection.
technology,
Yeah.
the detail, the engineering skill.
Right.
So his experiences of Krishna consciousness
Yeah,
and this experiences of
the divine
Goddess.
mother, goddess, yeah.
Kali and goddess Saraswati, they're all separate and are occurring at different.
No, they're connected. Oh, see, in record of yoga, so again, the goddess, like these are aspects of the goddess, right? But they're assimilated to a central goddess. And the central goddess is he calls her the divine mother. But in the record of yoga, he calls the central goddess Kali. So Kali, in that early text, in his own practice, Kali is the divine mother that has these four aspects: Maheshwari, Mahakali, Mahalakshmi, and Mahasaraswati. Okay? And Krishna is the male counterpart of Kali. So it's really the two kind of divine figures that he's surrendering to in the record of yoga are Krishna and Kali.
The masculine and
Yeah.
feminine.
Yeah. The masculine aspect is Krishna and the feminine aspect is Kali. And Kali's emanations are Maheshwari, Mahalakshmi, Mahasaraswati, and Mahakali. And he's turning to Mahakali and Mahasaraswati. He's saying the two aspects that are at work right now are Maheshwari and Mahasaraswati. But this has to change. He's almost willing a change. He says, if it is to happen now, Mahakali has to come into the picture along with Mahasaraswati.
It also reminds me of that line that God shall grow up while the wise men talk in sleep.
Yeah.
So this divine intervention that is talked about here
Yeah.
is for the whole world and the material nature, but individually people can get that in their yoga.
Yeah. Here he's talking about what are the powers of the mother active within the ignorance. That also culturally we see, as he's pointing out three different cultures, as I said, that predominate in the world. One is the culture of the West that gives great priority to the Madonna, the mother of suffering, because they recognize the fact that there is rampant suffering in the world and we need to have that compassion and pity, which is unconditional. And that recognizes the fact that after all is said and done, we still will have suffering. And we need the strength of pity and compassion to be able to sustain our condition there. So this aspect is coming to Savitri and saying, I am your soul. And it is one aspect of the Divine Mother that is established here. So similarly, you find the other two. He's referring to existing. The goddess power of strength is more predominant in the notion of Shakti in India, and the goddess of wisdom is more predominant in notion of goddesses like Athena in Greece, for example. These are the images that he's drawing on for these goddesses.
Her question was, I found it very interesting
Yeah.
that she's saying that whether individual agency is important or he's appealing to that or not. Is that?
Yeah, because so the Madonna of suffering is saying that I cannot change anything and
Yeah.
she's patiently waiting
Exactly.
for divine intervention.
Yeah,
So is she waiting for that divine intervention for the material nature?
yeah. For the world, yes,
world.
for the world. And you're talking about individual agency. Here also it's very importantly individual agency that's being talked about, because Savitri is not going to accept her. You see, she's going to say, I'm your soul, but she will not accept her as her soul. She'll accept her as a subsidiary power, a secondary power.
So that means that what she was saying, that individual is called upon to exceed
Yeah.
the universal.
Yeah. So Savitri is going to look for something integral beyond her, because she's not integral. She is only one aspect.
Well, she says as we read this, right, what is the stand or an attitude we should be taking while we are in this canto? Meaning, for example, I'm not Savitri.
No.
And,
No, but that's why we started by talking about these dualities and meditating on both of them. So in this canto, we have to see the divinity of this kind of goddess power that exists on earth and inside us as well, but we also have to see its limitation. We have to empower it and then hold the fact that something greater is needed in us. The intervention of a integral power is needed in us. But each one of these is important, really important. And so we have to hold that power also, but not be limited to it.
I just have one question related to goddess Annapurna that you spoke about.
Yeah.
So, from all these mythological stories, at that time, gods lived only in heaven, right? I mean, there was fight between demons and gods all the time. And
Yeah.
whenever God has to come down to earth, it will be in some sort of avatar or manifestation of something. But I don't understand how come goddess Annapurna stayed on earth, which is not the ideal place for gods. So,
No, so, I see in the Puranas, God can have abode on many planes. And several Puranas are also empowering the Tirthas. So Tirthas are these special places on earth where there are manifestations of the divine. So divine has put one emanation over there. So in this particular Purana, this Varanasi Tirtha and goddess Annapurna, whose temple is there to this day, they're saying that the presence of that goddess had been established over there.
even before Lord Shiva, right?
Yeah,
came down there.
yeah. So, yeah, right. I mean, so these things are happening, as you are rightly pointing out, these wars, and like the war of Mahishasura, etc., they're happening in the heaven worlds,
Yeah, they were
in
always
astral worlds,
Yeah.
But there are things happening on earth also. And so in this particular story, there is a descent of Shiva from that world to the earth. And this story is then first proceeding in these astral worlds. But then once he cuts off the fifth head of Brahma, he falls to the earth. And then he's roaming around. That's why, to some extent, and then as I said, it's a kind of a future story, because in India, even today, this ethic is there that if a beggar comes to your house, you should never refuse him and give him some food, because they say it may be Shiva. You see? So the idea that he's around, walking the earth, looking for this salvation, is a kind of a cultural trope that has entered from this story into life on earth.
Yeah, he came down in the right form as a beggar to come down to earth.
Yeah.
But I didn't understand the goddess part of it, like where she was here on earth.
Yeah. So, you see, from this point of view, like that's why Annapurna, the idea is that God or goddesses are also established on earth. They may be latent, but they're established on earth. So, Yes, I mean, from a chronological point of view, you may say, how can it be that gods are up there, but there are gods and goddesses here? But Puranas are written like that. They're empowering all these, like for them, eternal presence of God is there in many places on earth. Eternal presence. Like this one.
Including Sri Aurobindo and the mother?
No, of course, they don't talk about Sri Aurobindo and the
They
mother.
all existed in different eras, like Lord
The
Krishna.
Puranas
was
just don't,
different.
but I
Yeah,
take
that
it as
way,
the-
yes.
Yeah.
I
They
totally...
left on the earth.
Of course, I agree. That Mother has said that whenever there was even a ray of consciousness to be manifest, I was there.
Mm.
You know?
So it's 4:30. I'm kind of experiencing a saturation in the room. But anything,
Yeah.
any last?
Well, the distorted echo, I can read the distorted echo. And in there, the warped echo of her voice arises. This is her shadow which has been appropriated by the ignorance, the man of sorrows. It is the voice she keeps down, yet she is intimate with its pain. A voice of wrath took up the dire refrain, a growl of thunder or roar of angry beast. The beast that crouching growls within man's depths, voice of a tortured titan, once a god. I am the man of sorrows, I am he who is nailed on the wide cross of the universe. So you see what he's doing with the image of Christ. You have Madonna, but you have Christ. But Christ is now turned into this being who is tortured and who is almost like a beast. To enjoy my agony, God built the earth. My passion he has made his drama's theme. He has sent me naked into his bitter world and beaten me with his rods of grief and pain. That I might cry and grovel at his feet and offer him worship with my blood and tears. But God has taken from me the ancient force. There is a dull consent in my sluggish heart, a fierce satisfaction with my special pangs, as if they made me taller than my kind. This is the idea of suffering as a gift. See, it's almost it makes you titanically greater in the fact that you suffered. Only by suffering can I excel. I am the victim of titanic ills. I am the doer of demoniac deeds. I was made for evil. Evil is my lot. Evil I must be, and by evil live. Not other can I do but be myself. What nature made me, that I must remain. I suffer and toil and weep. I moan and hate. This is an inhuman stoic power, one that feels its superiority due to its excess of pain. At the very basis of this oppressed image is the falsehood of the absence or cruelty of God. Savitri replies to the Madonna of suffering because she is the one who needs to be assuaged. She needs the transformation of integrality for herself and her shadow. Madonna of suffering, Madonna of grief divine, thou art a portion of my soul put forth. To bear the unbearable sorrow of the world, because thou art, men yield not to their doom, but ask for happiness and strive with fate. Because thou art, the wretched still can hope, but thine is the power to solace, not to save. One day I will return, a bringer of strength, and make thee drink from the Eternal's cup. His streams of force shall triumph in thy limbs, and wisdom's calm control thy passionate heart. Thy love shall be the bond of humankind, compassion the bright sky of nature's acts. Misery shall pass abolished from the earth, the word shall be freed from the anger of the beast, from the cruelty of the Titan and his pain.